Saludos, it's your host, Gabe Morales. We've been covering Mexican Mafia members over the past 60 plus years. I don't show any U's, as in unicorn, that were MM members. I have a few that I believe were associates. So let me know if you know of any carnales that had a last name of U. I do have a few left with the last names of V through Z, as in Viva Zapata. I'll start off with Ruben Balardo Valdez, also known as Frog or Sapo. He also had a moniker that very few people know of called Fingers. He was from Wilmas and had an A number of 74806. I show he was made MA by at least 1967 when his name appeared on a Mexican Mafia roll call. He was involved in the shoe war of September 1968. There was very few MA left on the yard at that time, and so they're very much outnumbered by the Nuestra Familia Mexicana rebels. After MA member Robot Salas got into it with Mad Dog Padilla and Manuel Manito Romero on September 14th, 1968, during evening feeding, more fights occurred between the M and the NF. At that time, there were only 4 MA members left in general population: Ponce Amado, Capi Pacini, Tati Torres, and Frog Valdez. So he is hit during the shoe war. I show that he was close to Bogus Pete, also from Wilmas. And Frog was also close to a little-known Aryan Brotherhood member named Thomas Slim Center, who had major drug connections via Joe Morgan and via Tijuana politicians and police. Understand that Slim Center even wanted Joe Morgan to take out the mayor of Tijuana for burning him on a dope deal. But I show that Frog was hit on February 26, 1975 by La M, and he overdosed a couple days after. There was Jose Ramon Valdez, known as Gato from Los. I show he was born in the late 1940s and was likely made MA sometime in the mid-70s. I do show that he was at Lompoc with Herb Huerta from the Texas Mexican Mafia. I had an individual question my claim that the Texas MA had ties to the California MA because this individual had a Texas MA Constitution of 1990 that made no mention of Cheyenne Cadena. My mentor, Robert Mocha Morel, was one of the top 5 investigators in the Texas Department of Corrections when the prison gangs were jumping off in the early 1980s. And he interviewed many of the original Mexican MA or Texas Mexican Mafia leaders. And as I recall, he showed me a copy that Herb Huerta wrote in the early 1980s after he had been exposed to the California MA, saying that they represented the MA there in Texas and that they were modeled on the same principles as Cheyenne Cadena. I'll have to look for my copy of that. I lost a lot of my files, but I believe that original Constitution is printed in his book, The Mexican Mafia, The Story, by Robert Morel, which can be ordered online via Amazon. But I understand that later, after some protests by some of his own people, as well as California MA, did not authorize the name to be used, the Texas Mexican Mafia, is when I believe he changed it to Mexican MA to not be confused with the California MA. Anyways, not to get off subject, but Gato was housed with all the main players of the MA. And by that, I mean guys like Robert Salas, Joseph Chapulín Carvajal, who did have authorized ties to the Arizona Mexican Mafia, and Bruiser Briseño, amongst others. Understand that Gato was housed at Florence in 1990 and was deceased by around 1999. There was Angel Isaac Stump Valencia from Sangra. He murdered an individual named Mario Casas with Nico Velazquez and was inducted to the MA. Understand that his tío was George Silent Ruiz. And as I mentioned several times in previous episodes, Stump, along with Danny Boy Pina from Hazard, killed long-respected MA shot caller Mo Farrell at Folsom Prison. They were assisted by Ruben Tupi Hernandez, who held the door and was on point. Just as I encountered Danny Boy on the new side of Folsom in the early 90s, so I encountered Stump Valencia in the Violence Control Unit in April of 1991 after this picture was taken. Unfortunately for Stump, he aligned with Cuate Grajeda in his war against Topo Peters, and Cuate lost out on that one. Topo and Boxer Talento had ordered a hit on Stump in the year 2000. I showed he was housed in Ironwood State Prison around 2001, and he dropped out in 2002 at Pelican Bay and testified against Lalo Martinez and Mo Ruiz. Stump died a couple of years ago in December of 2021. There was a Richard Tiny Valencia from 18th Street. He had a G number of 54474. And I show hit CDC around 2009. He was housed at Corcoran in 2016, and I show is currently housed at CIM in Chino. There was Armando Valencia Martinez, also known as Chavitas. I show he lived in LA and Arizona in 1962. He was popped on a burglary charge in 1962 in Arizona and did DOC time in that state, I believe at their Florence prison, which is different from the one in Colorado. He paroled in 1964 and then got popped on a dope charge in 1972, whereby he did time in Phoenix. I showed then he was charged federally and did time at Lompoc in 1976, as well as Leavenworth. He then returned back to Lompoc in the late 70s through early 80s and was housed with all the big homies, including Roland Berry. I show he was housed at Marion from 1982 to 1987 and then was released, but got popped on a bank robbery charge in 1995 and was sent to the ADX in 2005. I show he was released from BOP custody in October 2002 and I believe disappeared. There was Luis Valenzuela, also known as $1 Million Lou from Primera Flats. He had a B number of 15117. They show that he was made MA by 1970 at Soledad and then was moved to San Quentin in 1971. I understand that he was stabbed there by the Nuestra Familia and when released had burned Moa Aguirre, who was the director of Lucha, which was an MA-controlled drug program. Understand for that act, he was ordered to be killed by Joe Morgan, and he was stabbed, burned, and his body was found by LAX in June of 1978. There was Alberto Betto Baez from La Puente. He had an A number of 2339. And later on had a B number of 49705. He was known to be a major enforcer for Robot Salas, and I understand murdered an NF associate named Manny Lopez in January 1977. He also was involved in the murder of George Pollo Felix in February of 1977. Understand that he was murdered by the MA in June of 1979 in La Puente, where he was from. There was a Ray Termite Vara from Rivas. He had a C number of 25007. I show that he was MA by at least the late 1980s and was a colonel for many years. I understand that he hit his cellie, Steve Castillo, in 2003 at Pelican Bay, which was ordered by Cuate Grajeda, and I show is no longer in custody. There was Armando Varela, who was out of an old, now extinct barrio called First in Indiana on the east side of LA. He had an A number of 52725. Munday was made MA in the early 1960s and was a prominent figure at Folsom Prison during the 1970s. He was involved in the 187 of Emil Duran in February 1973, with Pieface Ortega being his lookout. He was also involved in the 187 of Gilbert Roybal in Fresno in February 1977, but actually voted no on that hit. He was also present during the murder of a female named Gloria Chavez and many other hits. Along with Alfie Sosa, he was stopped by my mentor, Robert Mocha Morel, in Monterey Park in the late 70s, which was a big mess and the subject of a book he wrote called The Traffic Stop. After Munday worked as an informant for the California Gang Task Force as an undercover informant, he was moved out of state to Arizona and died there in 1987. I understand of alcoholism, years of heroin abuse, and a broken heart. There was Roberto Betto Vargas, who I mentioned in the San Ojeda piece. Betto was from Bulan Parque, which is in the San Gabriel Valley, where I have relatives. Betto was sent to the feds with BOP number 29866-198. I understand that he was sponsored by San Ojeda in 2008, but that the MA Commission denied that membership. I'm not exactly sure why, but he was told by Champ to quit representing himself as MA and had already placed on a black hand on his left shoulder, as seen here. When he got out of the feds and was working for Sana in Orange County, he ordered the 187 of Sana's arch rival, Armando Mando Moreno, in 2011. He was busted by local law enforcement and housed at the LA County Jail in 2012 and was indicted on a RICO case, whereby he was returned to the feds. I understand that Beto is up for release in May of 2026. There was a Salvador Tiny Vargas, and I understand was made MA when he participated in the murder of Yogi Bear Arias at Tehachapi on October 19, 1972, along with Biggs Mata and David Gallegos. Pieface ended up testifying against Tiny and the other carnales in that case. There was Martin Cato Vargas from Fresno. He was very much into Aztec mythology and also had a code name of Quetzalcoatl, who was one of the main gods amongst the Aztecas, who was related to the elements of the wind and sun, as well as being very wise. And Vargas had a large war shield in the center of his chest. And that Cato was involved in the slaying of Jesse Bozo Castro Renteria, who had a B number of 31838. This occurred at DBI on July 3rd, 1972. Understand that Cato was assisted by Aryan Brotherhood shot caller Barry Mills, but I don't believe either were convicted of that slaying. Cato and Mills were also involved in some bank robberies in the Fresno area, and Cato was sent to the feds in the late 70s. He was housed in Lompoc in the late 70s and 80s under BOP number 14161-116, but is not currently in BOP custody. There was Raul Dagwood Vasquez from Compton Barrio 155s. He had a B number of 12063. He hit CDC in 1968 and was given life. Understand, he was made MA by at least 1971 and remained at Tecato for most of his life, and was a victim of a fatal overdose on October 13th, 1994 at the LA County Jail. And finally, we have Francisco Vasquez Escalante from 18th Street. I believe he was made MA in the feds and had a black hand behind his ear. He had BOP number 97730-012. And I did some time at Victorville in 2007 and 2008, being released from the BOP in September 2014. Ended up going down to Tijuas, where he's involved in Peanut Butter Luis's crew. But evidently him and his homeboy, Ramon Thumper Tannery, also from 18th Street, ran afoul of the MA and was killed for that in TJ. And so I'll have to stop there. We're almost done with Mexican Mafia members over the past 60 plus years. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. When you're I like to think kind of